Well, good morning. My name is Pete Thomas. I'm speaking to you today from Loughborough University in the UK, and I'll be joined in this webinar by colleagues Stijn Daniels at the Weers Institute in Belgium, Eleonora Papadimitriou at the National Technical University of Athens, Wendy Wijmars at the Dutch Road Safety Institute, George Yanis, also at the National Technical University of Athens, and Suzanne Kaiser at KFV in Vienna. And this webinar is to show today the results of the work of the Safety Cube project, which is a European funded research project to build a road safety decision support system. And today we'll be describing the DSS, as we call it, and showing how it works and showing some of the key features of it. With this webinar, I'll point out that at the bottom of your screen on the dashboard that there is the opportunity to raise questions. So at the end of the presentations, we will be able to answer written questions that have been provided, and we'll aim to do that. So if there are questions that come up during the presentation, please write them down and use the question tab that you'll see. So first of all then, the Safety Cube decision support system is the results of 3 years' work of this European research project. And the intention is to provide to road safety policymakers and their advisors the key way to access information about road safety risks and also about measures. And the background to the work is that we've seen many countries now using data about accidents, data about the causes of accidents to drive their road safety problems and road safety policies. But many countries are still saying that they need specific information about understanding the nature of the problem and also the effectiveness of the solutions. So within the road safety decision support system, we're bringing together information about risks and measures, information not just about infrastructure, but also about other factors, road user behavior factors and vehicle factors that are related to road safety, and pulling all of this together in an extensive web-based reference system. So the concept is that we are providing a wealth of information that's been gathered together from the scientific literature and amalgamated, consolidated into a format that's specific for the needs of policymakers. And the information that you'll find tells us about the risk factors themselves and also about the effectiveness of measures. So this enables policymakers to ask the question, well, I see I have this particular road safety problem. What types of solutions are there for that? Which ones work the most effectively? How can they be transferable to my particular situation? So we've assembled the decision support system with these key objectives. First of all, to provide a user-friendly, web-based decision support tool that's interactive, that the user can use to explore and find the answers to their own situations. That it contains information about measures, about the effectiveness of measures, but also because the cost effectiveness of measures is an important factor very often, to include information about that as well. And then finally, information about serious injuries, which is becoming one of the hot topics and important topics for road safety decision makers around the world. So the types of questions that the DSS is targeting is, for example, how important is my road safety problem? And what does that problem look like? How can I understand the underlying factors? Because the more that we understand those factors, the more specific we can be about solutions. But what solutions are available? Is it true that a problem that derives from road user behaviour can only be addressed by measures that affect road user behaviour, or are there other measures available as well? And what is the efficiency of those solutions? And we believe that the SafetyCube decision support system has the answers to many of these questions. It's targeted primarily to public authorities, both at a local level, regional level, and national and international level, but also key stakeholders in the vehicle, the roads, in the insurance industries, and also the experts that sit behind many of the policy decisions in road safety institutes and the NGOs. I'll hand over now to my colleague Stijn Daniels at VIAS, who will talk us through the methodologies that have been used to develop the DSS. So Stijn, you now have the keyboard and mouse.
Yes, thank you, Pete, and good morning. So the purpose of this part is to give a brief and really not too technical overview of the main elements of the methodology that has been used in the project. And at the core of the project, there are a few elements, and I will explain some of them a bit more in detail. What has been very important is that taxonomies have been created of risk factors and measures, and that obviously a very exhaustive literature review has been done, that all the information resulting from that literature review has been coded according to a certain structure. I come back to that in order to put all these results in a backend database. Quite many meta-analyses have been carried out to summarize effects of risk factors and measures to some usable, very generic data. And a whole series of documents, we call them synopses, have been written to summarize the results of that work into pieces of text that are well accessible by many people. It is important to mention that all this has been done in the framework of a systems approach, because sometimes you can say if you just code some studies, it's just about individual measures. So we have really tried to create the links between the road user, the vehicle, and the infrastructure. We have had to prioritize also some topics based, among others, on a consultation of a number of stakeholders, just to list those priority issues that are really needing to get attention right now. And obviously there has been some quality assurance procedure too. Very shortly about that taxonomy. So basically this is a structure that determined let's say the structure of our work as researchers, but also that is used in the final product to show how the different elements of the system are linked to each other. And we have done that for both for risks and measures. Just for clarification, risks are all sorts of factors in road safety that might explain the level of road safety. Measures are typically things that are done, countermeasures intentionally set up by some actors to improve road safety conditions. This has been done in a hierarchical way which means that obviously one usually starts on a higher level. For instance, you use the keyword like education, and gradually you go to a lower level. For instance, in the case of education, that might be very specific topics such as effects of campaigns for specific targets for seatbelt use or for drunk driving, etc., etc. That whole taxonomy is also very well visible in the final web tool, but this will be explained later in the session. A second element in that whole method is not just the structure, that taxonomy, but how to fill up that structure with content. And obviously, a very large portion of the work has been dedicated to that. We have tried to develop a very systematic approach in terms of, for each and every study, very systematically describe the method that was used, the conditions for which it is applicable, and also we have done some effort to describe the transferability of the results, because that's sometimes a bit subjective, but it's very important to assess for possible users, let's say, how well conditions in one country, in one jurisdiction, for one road type or road user type can be or cannot be transferable to other conditions. For practical purposes, we developed this coding template, and that's not so important right now, but it's just to show you that all the work has been done in a very systematical way. All these templates are, let's say, in the back office of the system, and they have been used for coding all studies. This is also a bit of background information. This is the structure of the database, or at least part of it, just to show you that there is really something behind everything that you will see on the website. But more important than that are the synopses, because they are really the product that is visible to users of the system. And already that as such is a very interesting final product of the project, because all these synopses are basically documents that provide information on each and every risk factor or measure that is included in the system. And we have developed them according to a more or less identical structure, always containing a very brief key conclusion. So if you need to find some information on a very particular topic, as it is shown here, effect of traffic volume on road safety, you just click and you see in a few sentences, you already get a good first impression on what it means and what known results are. We also described it a bit more elaborately in an overview, including a scientific summary, so really referring to the source material, the studies that have been included, what they learn us, some background material, and very important that this is done according to a similar structure for all these documents. And then last but not least about this part is that all these synopses were attributed a color code, which basically is a very simple, a very intuitive system that shows whether a particular risk factor or a countermeasure really is something dangerous. So red is used as a color code for something that is dangerous in the sense of either an increased risk, or in case of the countermeasure of a measure that is not effective at all. Whereas the green codes really mean that this is a factor that does not increase risk, or is a countermeasure that's probably more important, a countermeasure that is really has really shown to be very effective in reducing road safety risks. And these color codes are available for all measures and all risk factors that are included in the system. So it's a very well accessible piece of information for all sorts of users of the system. Yeah. A next step is not just to describe what effects of measures are or what levels of risk are, but also to try to give some clues for prioritization of measures, because it's not just because a measure is effective that it should be applied. Usually in the real world there are some constraints, not the least budget constraints, that make that not all measures can be taken, and certainly not at the same time. So a very important part of the project also has been prioritization. And in the project, basically 3 different tools have been considered to do this prioritization, or this economic efficiency evaluation. 2 of these tools are mentioned here. It's a cost effectiveness analysis. So basically saying for each prevented crash what the cost of the measure is. And the other one is cost benefit analysis, the one that is typically used throughout the project. The third one, I just mentioned it, it's cost utility analysis. It's not really applied to the cases in the project, basically due to the typical lack of information on elements that are needed for that. Well, just to make this not too technical, I explain you how you can use that in the system. So basically there are 3 options. All examples that have been elaborated in the project are available on the website of the Safety Cube. So for every user, it's easy to consult these examples just like that. Or if you are a user that wants to do something extra, or you want to adapt it to your own situation, your own country, your own jurisdiction, your own scale level, then you can adapt the information from the example to your own purposes. Let's say if you have reasons to believe that the costs of some measures are higher in your case, or lower, or whatever, you can adapt it in the system and subsequently calculate your own benefit to cost ratio or some other outcome data. Or if you like, you can also, as a user, really start from scratch. There is an interesting calculator available that allows relatively easily to do some calculations. I should be a bit careful when I call it relatively easily, because if you are not really familiar with cost-benefit analysis, we really recommend you to read through the 7 pages of instruction that are available as well, that we have prepared, and that give every user a kind of a good insight in what can be done, but also what are some risks when using this kind of calculations and interpreting the results that come from them. One of the major criticisms, by the way, on cost-benefit analysis is that the outcomes completely depend on the costs that are assumed for crashes. And those who are a bit familiar with the literature on that know that there are quite some variations in estimates. So we offered a few possibilities. In fact, one of the principal goals of SafetyCube with this respect has been to overcome these huge variations by developing a common approach that is valid for all EU countries. And this has worked quite well in the sense that we now are able to offer the user either the possibility to do a crash cost collection and calculation based on what has been reported in the past for the country itself. So if your country or someone in your country has done that, it's available. But we also, because that's the case in which most countries are, we also developed EU standardized cost that helps us, in fact, to average some values and to express some values in EU terms, which is very helpful in assessing or in comparing many types of different measures. Another element that is very important in this cost-benefit analysis is that we have done the effort to harmonize estimates, basically cost estimates from one country to another and from one period in time to another by means of what is called value transfer. So assume that you have taken a measure in one country. Let's say you find back some results on installing traffic signals in one country in, for instance, the year 2000. Well, this tool enables us to express all the costs in 2015 terms and to transfer costs that are typically valid for one country to levels that are valid for any other country in Europe or for the EU average, what we call the PPP, the purchasing power parity, a very important element in really making sure that results that we get out of different sources are really somehow comparable. And last but not least, about that cost-benefit analysis, as I have mentioned, there are quite many uncertainties usually, not just about costs of measures, but also about effects of measures. They are typically expressed by confidence intervals, 95% confidence intervals with a lower limit and an upper limit. There is also sometimes difference in what the target groups are for some sorts of crashes. They might differ a bit from one country to another. So we have included in all the examples that we developed ourselves some sensitivity analysis, meaning that we can vary, or we did vary the costs of the measures, typically by, in a first best estimate scenario, just providing what is the most plausible, and then in a second scenario, decreasing the costs with 50%, and in a third scenario, increasing them with 100%. We did the same for the lower limit and the upper limit of the confidence interval for the effects of the measure. And then finally, we combined scenarios in the sense of taking the highest cost option and the lowest effect option together. That's the worst case. And then the ideal case, obviously the lowest cost option and the highest effect option. And the result, or some result of these analysis, is given on the right hand side. So it shows the difference between the benefit to cost ratio. So if you divide benefits by costs, it's for this measure, it's a 7.3, which means that it's quite beneficial. And for this measure, in fact, it stays green, it stays higher than 1 in whatever scenario. So meaning that even if some of the basic assumptions are changed quite drastically, this measure remains beneficial. And that's we think that's something that is very important in properly executing these cost benefit analysis.
Thank you very much, Stein. I'd like to hand over now to my colleague, Eleonora Papadimitriou, who will explain the backbone, in fact, of the decision support system, which is this link between risks and measures. So, Eleonora, you should now have the mouse. So.
Thank you very much, Pete. So the linking between risks and measures is one of the main components of the SafetyCube DSS, and it is also aimed to be a major added value of the DSS, so making the system's approach really implemented for decision support. So in SafetyCube, we first developed a methodology, a dedicated methodology for linking risks and measures. We reviewed a number of existing theoretical frameworks for linking risk factors and measures from the literature, and we exploited these frameworks to develop a particular theory for the SafetyCube DSS. This is based on a crash chain model on which we will give details in the next slide. And it was applied through the existing expert knowledge within the SafetyCube consortium. This theoretical framework was implemented in a set of concrete links between risks and measures, integrated in the DSS, and allowing the user to explore and identify a range of solutions with potential of addressing road safety problems. One thing that we would like to underline is that this is a framework expressing the theoretical potential of the effects of measures to address specific risks, and it is the DSS, the contents of the DSS, meaning the individual studies, the synopsis, and the meta-analysis, that allow the user to either validate these links, so identify whether a measure is really effective to address this risk factor, or conditionalize the links, meaning that it allows the user to understand under which conditions a measure can be most effective, the cases for which there is uncertainty, and which are the sources of this uncertainty. We developed a model linking risk factors and measures by decomposing each crash into a chain of risk factors and outcomes. So our key assumption is that each crash type is caused by a combination of circumstantial risks and pre-existing generic risks. What do we mean by generic and circumstantial risks? Generic risks, we mean risks that are related to the baseline risk, the baseline conditions pre-existing the crash, corresponding to, for example, the experience, the skills, and the perceptions and awareness of the user, the design of the road, the condition of the vehicle, the type of vehicle, the age of vehicle, because certain users are by default more at risk than others. Certain vehicles are by default less protected than others, and there are geometric and traffic control designs of the road network that affect the level of risk that pre-exists on the road network. In addition to these generic risk factors, we assume that there are a number of circumstantial risk factors which can be related, again, to either the user, the infrastructure, or the vehicle that also interact. So this can be, for example, driver impairment due to alcohol or drugs or fatigue. It can be adverse weather conditions, for example, rain that will affect the road surface conditions and the visibility, and it can be a technical issue on the vehicle. So we consider that there are a number of generic risk factors pre-existing the crash, and there are circumstantial risk factors that are added on top of the baseline risk level. And this combination of risk factors may result to specific crash types. So there are combinations of risk factors that will increase the likelihood of a single vehicle run-off-road crash, and there are other combination of factors that will result in a, for example, rear-end collision. And we provide here a couple of examples. For instance, generic risks such as horizontal alignment deficiencies, the design of a curve, and insufficient skills of the driver may interact with road surface deficiencies, further strengthened by adverse weather, and this may increase the risk of a single vehicle run-off road accident. So this is an overview of the SafetyCube model aimed to link risk factors with measures. So we have risk factors that can be generic pre-crash or circumstantial, that is crash specific, and these risk factors will interact, resulting in a specific outcome, either in terms of a crash type or in terms of a level of severity of the crash. Accordingly, we distinguish measures into measures that are aimed to addressing generic risks, measures that are aimed to address circumstantial risks, measures that are aimed to address a specific crash scenario, and measures like post-impact care measures that are aimed to address a specific crash severity. And we also, in this model, we indicate also the level of uncertainty in the effectiveness of these measures, because there will always be a level of uncertainty due to either behavioral adaptation of the road users. So we improve road design, but this may result in increased speeds, or to other side effects of the measures. So, for example, we may install safety barriers, but this may induce risks for motorcyclists. So there is a theoretical potential of all measures to address a certain risk factor or a certain outcome, but there will be uncertainty or other side effects affecting the eventual effectiveness of the measure. And a couple of examples how the links between risks and measures are displayed in the DSS, and there will be a detailed demonstration later on. So if we select the risk factor fatigue due to not enough sleep from the SafetyCube DSS, and we are looking for related measures, there will be a list of measures concerning both behavior, for example, fitness to drive assessment and campaigns on fatigue, various infrastructure measures like installation of median and safety barriers and clear zones, which are to prevent the consequences of a run off road due to fatigue. And there are also vehicle systems like lane departure warning and drowsiness and distraction recognition that can also help to address risks due to driver fatigue. This also works the other way around. For each measure that we present in the DSS, there are also a number of related risk factors, so risks that can be addressed from this measure. So, for example, in the SafetyCube DSS, if we look to the measure emergency braking assistance systems and we look for related risks, we can see again that there are risks related to behavior like headway distance, and if we click on headway distance, there will be the results of SafetyCube in terms of synopsis and studies displayed, as is in this screenshot. But there can be also risks related to the infrastructure and the traffic conditions. So, for example, emergency braking assistance systems can prevent secondary crashes. And also related to the vehicle, this measure is aimed to address any risk related to the occurrence of a rear impact. So this is a brief overview of how the links between risks and measures are displayed on the DSS, and an online demonstration will follow.
Thank you very much, Eleonora. Before we get to that online demonstration, I'll just invite Wendy Weimars from SWAV to provide us with an overview of the work also that's gone into the DSS about serious injuries. Wendy, you should now have the mouse.
Thank you, Pete, and good morning, everybody. I will quickly guide you through the work that we did on serious injuries. Yes. Traditionally, road safety policy making was mainly aimed at reducing the number of fatalities. Yet recently, serious injuries are increasingly being adopted as an additional road safety performance indicator. For example, in the European Union, but also in individual countries. In 2013, the high-level group of on road safety of the European Commission established a definition, an official EU definition of a serious road injury, as being a non-fatal road traffic casualty with an injury severity level of MIS 3+. And MIS is the maximum abbreviated injury score. So those are medically seen as serious injuries. And all EU member states were asked to provide data on serious injuries from 2014 on, and they could apply one of the three methods stated here. First of all, they could apply correction factors to police data. Alternatively, they can use hospital data to estimate the number of MIS 3+ casualties, or they can use a combination of police and hospital data. As serious injuries are a relatively new topic, information and knowledge on serious injuries is relatively scarce compared to information and knowledge on fatalities. So that's why we did quite a lot of work on serious injuries within SafetyCube. First of all, we assessed current and planned practices across Europe by means of a survey, and we applied different methods to the same data to analyze the effect of methodological differences. And on the basis of the survey and the analysis that we did, we developed practical guidelines that countries can use to improve or to come to more comparable estimates of the number of MICE3 plus casualties. So that's the first report that you see on the slide, deliverable 7.1. Second, we looked into consequences of serious road injuries. We did a literature review, and we analyzed some additional data and or studies that the SafetyCube partners had access to. And we calculated the burden of injury of serious non-fatal injuries for a number of EU countries. That's deliverable 7.2. And then we looked into costs related to serious road injuries. We did that together with another European Horizon 2020 project, INDEF. We distributed a survey among the European countries, and we collected information of costs, and we also asked specific for costs related to serious road injuries. Additionally, we collected extra information on medical costs and costs related to production loss, and we looked into different methods for calculating the immaterial or human costs of non-fatal serious injuries. And finally, we looked into risk factors that are associated with serious injuries. We did that by following a two-step approach. First of all, we determined which groups of casualties are of special relevance concerning serious injuries. And we did that by looking at groups with a relatively high MICE3 plus to fatality ratio or relatively large burden of injury of non-fatal injuries compared to fatal injuries. And then the second step, for 4 of the selected groups, we analyzed in-depth data to look at risks associated with the serious, with those groups of casualties. You can find the information in the 4 deliverables that are shown here, but a summary of the main results are also included in the DSS. You can find that in the knowledge section of the DSS. There is a tab serious injuries, and there you can find synopsis-like documents that are really short, summarizing the main results.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague George Yanis at the University of Athens to present the decision support system. So George, you now have the mouse.
Thank you, Pete. In fact, based on all this extensive work carried out by the SafetyCube experts, we did consolidated in a nice system where primarily we have decided to be modern, ergonomic, with a simple structure, with powerful search engines and fully documented and easily updated system, where we consolidated by today something like 1,250 studies with more than 7,500 estimates of risks and measures effects on the 4 pillars: the behavior, the infrastructure, the vehicle, and the post-impact care, together with 211 road safety synopses on risks and measures, and 36 cost-benefit analysis. In fact, the system is quite simple and aiming to be self-explaining, with 5 categories at the menu, 3 contextual ones, search, which is the main component with searching risk factors and measures. The knowledge category, where we summarize all the wealth of information in 211 synopses and the related texts of serious injuries and accident scenarios. And the tool, the calculator of economic efficient evaluation, where one can make his own calculations. And then we have the support, the background menu categories, the methodology with full system documentation and the glossary, etc., and the support with contact information and the feedback. In fact, the strength of the system, it's a search engine, which one can search risk factors and measures through 5 entry points: keyword search, risk factor search, measure search, road users group and accident categories, allowing to customize and to be flexible to each final user specific needs. Either we know the risk factor or the measure that we are looking for, or we just simply press a keyword or go through specific road user groups, for example, vulnerable road users or specific vehicle types. The structure is quite simple because we have just 3 levels. The first level, it is the search machine with the 5 entry points. The second level, it is the results pages with a brief introduction of the results, the color codes of how important it is, the risk or the measure, the synopsis and the coded studies. And the third level, it is the individual studies pages with all the information at disaggregate level with detailed effects, with all the necessary information about the study. And then, not to forget the links between risks and measures, that we can go not only vertically at the 3 levels, but also horizontally. We can switch between risk factors and measures. In the results page, one can see that it is fully customized to be flexible for any query. We can refine risk factors, type of road, type of user, and the countries, with specific information on the level of risk with the color code, the synopsis PDF access, and the full list of the individual studies. And then from this page, we can always visit any one of the 211 synopses, the synthesis on risk factors or measures, with a summary of 2 pages, and then a scientific overview and supporting document summarizing the converging trends of the different studies, because not all the studies were leading to the same direction, but we carried out the respective meta-analysis to provide a nice synthesis useful for the end user. And then the feature of linking road risk factors with the measures through the dedicated model presented by Eleonora. Every risk factor of the 88 ones is linked to one or more road safety measures and vice versa, through a total of 762 links between risk factors and measures. And then we have the third level, the individual study pages with the full information, title, author, source, abstract, the study design info, the study results, etc. So the last contextual component, it is the SafetyCube DSS calculator, which, as already mentioned by Steen, it combines information about the effectiveness of a measure, for example, the percentage of crashes or casualties prevented, with costs of this measure, and integrates updated information of crash costs in the European countries, and allows to express all costs and benefits of a measure in a monetary values and conduct cost-benefit analysis. So one can perform its own analysis with its own input data, or select from the SafetyCube examples of cost-benefit analysis with measures with high effectiveness, measures that no information is available, etc. So that was a brief overview of the system, and perhaps now we can proceed in hands-on examples.
Yes, thank you, George. We'll now invite Eleonora Papadimitri again and Suzanne Kaiser to give us the hands-on example. So over to the two of you, you each have the mouse.
You can see my screen. This is the home page of the SafetyCube DSS, where you can see the 5 tabs, the 3 contextual ones, search, knowledge, and calculator, and the 2 static supporting ones, which are methodology and support. For example, one can select risk factors, and we can see the SafetyCube taxonomy listed for behavior, infrastructure, and vehicle. And here, for infrastructure, one can select, for instance, work zones. And we get to the respective DSS results page, in which we can see that there are 3 specific risk factors: work zone length, work zone duration, or insufficient signage. And there are different road user groups and different road types for which we can refine the search. There are, in each case here, the SafetyCube synopsis with a brief description of the color code assigned to each risk factor. So red for the length of a work zone and yellow for the duration of a work zone. And clicking on the PDF, we can download and view the respective synopsis, a PDF document, as mentioned, with 3 sections. And underneath, we can see that there are 12 studies on road work zones in the SafetyCube DSS. And by clicking to each one of them, we can go to the respective detailed study page. A respective example for the measures, for instance, here, apart from behavior, infrastructure, and vehicle, we also have post-impact care. And again, for example, we may select from infrastructure formal tools to address road network deficiencies, and have here specific measures which can be road safety audits, road safety inspections, high-risk sites identification, or land use regulations improvement. And by refining, we can select high-risk sites treatment, and all the results are filtered into 4 studies and 1 synopsis. And here, for example, for high-risk sites identification, we can see which are the related risk factors. And of course, high-risk sites treatments are a treatment aimed to improve road infrastructure-related risks, such as low curve radius, high grade, high number of conflict points at junctions. And if we click, for example, the risk of high grade, we can see here underneath the SafetyCube results on high grade. I can also show an example of the SafetyCube DSS calculator. So here you can see that there are 2 options. One is to select my measure and perform my own cost-benefit analysis, or select one of the SafetyCube examples And here we can see a drop-down list with the 35 safety cube cost-benefit analysis. And if we select, for example, the implementation of rumble strips at center line, we can see that the input fields of the calculator are already pre-filled with all the costs and effectiveness values used by the safety cube partners. And if we click submit, we can go to the results and see that there are the costs and the benefits calculated in monetary terms, so the prevented crashes and casualties, the net present value, and of course the benefit cost ratio of the implementation of rumble strips at center line, which is found to be very cost effective. We can see also that another PDF icon appears, which includes all the details of the safety cube example implementation of rumble strips at center line, and apart from the cost benefit ratio that also appeared online, we also have a full sensitivity analysis for low measure effect, high measure effect, low measure cost, high measure costs, so that the user can see worst case and ideal case scenarios for the implementation of this measure, and of course all the assumptions and the documentation used to produce this safety cube example. So I will now give the screen back to Loughborough so that Susanne can make additional demonstration of the DSS.
So, Susanne, you now have the screen.
Thank you, Eleonora. Thank you, Pete. Good morning, everybody. I'm showing you another example how to use the DSS. I'm trying to make it really quick since we're running out of time. Let's start with risk factors. I'm going to show you an example from the realm of road user behavior and road user characteristics. So we can browse through, as Eleonora already told us, through our taxonomy, broad categories of risk factors from the realm of behavior, infrastructure, and vehicle. And let's say we're interested in the topic of risk taking. We get two synopses for the topics of overtaking as well as for close following behavior. At one glimpse, you can see it's yellow color code, meaning that it's probably risky for both of the risk factors. You can have with one click on the PDF icon the synopsis with further detail. It opens up in a new tab. And then below you have a number of 19 studies that are all related to overtaking and close following. If you want to narrow down the search, we can go to head with distance, close following, or tailgating. And you have still a number of 5 studies. Let's say you're interested in the study that comes from Australia. You can narrow down further. Or from Finland, you have one study from Finland. And if you click on the title, you get into the results page of just this one individual study. So here, what you got here is an abstract, a summary that is provided by the Safety Cube experts. It's similar to the abstracts, but the difference is that we are focusing in the summary on the risk factor and not so much the context of the whole study, but on the riskiness of the risk factor. We made some comments to the studies in the section of limitations. If we think that this study in terms of methodological design has some lacks, we make it transparent and say, okay, here you got the information, but be careful. Here are some limitations to the study in our opinion, in the opinion of our Safety Cube experts. You get further detailed information on the studies, and then you get a list of effects that are coded for this study. This result you get over for all the studies that are coded, that are in the system. So, for example, for the topic of risk taking for 19 studies. If you want to narrow down on risky overtaking, for example, we can also see what can we do about it, about risky overtaking. We can go to related measures, and then you get from, again, the realms of behavior, infrastructure, if applicable, vehicle or post-impact care, the measures that are related to this risk factor. For example, you might want to design a campaign on aggressive and inconsiderate behavior. Again, what you get is a synopsis, and at first glimpse, a color code that shows the effectiveness of this measure, and again, a list of studies that are related to this topic. Just the same, you can go to the section of measures. Again, here you have, again, for example, awareness raising and campaign as a behavioral measure. Here you can see more synopses, more topics related to campaigns and awareness raising. In general, related to seatbelts, related to child restraints, and again, an assessment of the effectiveness of this measure, a synopsis icon to open up the synopsis, and a list of related studies. If you don't find what you're looking for in the taxonomy under risk factor or measure, you can also go to the keyword search and type in your search term. For example, we're looking at close following behavior. You start to type and it's autocomplete. It suggests already what's in there for close, so close following behavior. But somebody else might want to look up the same contents, but is referring to the same topic as tailgating. You type tailgating, and as well, there is a suggestion, the autocomplete tailgating, and it's narrowing down to all the topics, risk factor and measure-wise, that are related somehow to tailgating. In this case, we can go to risk-taking, and we get the same results as I showed you before, the two topics of overtaking and close following behavior. We can narrow down again the studies that are related to this topic, just as I told you and as I showed you before. So I think I leave it at this since we're running out of time. I think you got a good impression of how to use the system, and just go on the website and browse. It's very intuitive, and yeah, just play around and see what you can find in there. I'm handing over back to Pete. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much now, Suzanne. I really just like to sum up, in a sense, what has already been said about the DSS. And I think one of the key messages that we have is that something like the SafetyCube decision support system will, it's a product of the Horizon 2020 research project, but it's something that we from the group that have prepared it really want to see continuing. There's something like the decision support system will very quickly go out of date if it's not kept, and so we're very much looking now into how to ensure the future operation of the DSS, and by that we mean that it's continued access, free access to the public for all of the content that is currently available. We see the need to maintain with the most recent studies that are produced. There's always studies on risk factors and on measures that are being produced, and so it's important that we aim to keep this up to date. There are some of the comments and feedback that we've already received is that it would be very beneficial if we were able to, first of all, include studies that have been conducted in more languages. While we've aimed to cover studies really from globally, there has been some restrictions on the language, the original language of those studies. So we would like to extend those, but also to have available the contents of the decision support system in other languages. For example, maybe Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, to make it accessible to a much wider global audience. Also, we see the value in enabling people who conduct their own studies to submit the results to the group of experts who maintain the level of quality of the DSS, and then be incorporated within the decision support system. And there's many other ways in which that it can be extended. So we're now in the position of putting together a partnership of public and private organisations that will help provide the framework for the future of the decision support system. And certainly we'd invite attendees to this webinar. If there's an area of this that you'd like to discuss with us, or areas that you think you'd be able to help, then we'd invite you to contact us either through the decision support system itself, and you can see the web link. Oops, I'm sorry. You can see the web link there on the screen at the bottom, or also through the project website, the safetycube-project.eu, where you'll also find a recording of this webinar and all of the deliverables, all of the outputs from the project. So there's ways of contacting us through each of those. And equally, if you have any comments or suggestions on the decision support system itself, we'd be very glad to hear them. So we've overrun slightly on time, so my apologies for that, but I hope that you do feel that this has been a useful webinar. I can see that virtually everybody that started with us is still with us now, so thank you all very much. I just say my thanks for my colleagues who've been presenting various aspects of the project and the DSS. Also, my thanks to Klaus Maketer and Rob Thompson, who've been very instrumental in putting this webinar together. So we'll close the webinar now, and I'll say thank you all for attending. I hope it's been useful, and we look forward to any comments that you may have. So thank you all very much.